Chosen one, you were built to receive what God has been trying to send you, not in a general sense, not as a broad spiritual truth applied loosely to anyone who listens, specifically, structurally, at a level beneath the person you had to become to survive this life, beneath the voice that learned to doubt, beneath the faith that sometimes ran dry, beneath every season you navigated while quietly wondering if God had forgotten which direction you were walking. There is a receiver, a divine receiver, built into you before you had the language to name it. And for a long time, something has been transmitting on that frequency. God has been calling you, chosen one, not as background truth, as present, specific, appointed reality. And today, right now, in this moment, that you arrived at not by accident, but by something higher than your own choosing, He is calling one last time. Those words carry weight. They are supposed to, because there is something about a divine season, a window of calling, that is open and clear and within reach, that does not remain open indefinitely. The call does not stop because God stops loving you. The call narrows because seasons move, and what is possible inside this one will not be equally possible in the next. You are inside this season right now, and the frequency is clear. Stay with me. What I am about to show you will name everything you have been feeling and show you exactly what to do with it. Everything you are about to receive in this message is freely given. But if at any point your spirit tells you there is more, something beyond what these words alone can carry, you will find it in the description below and in the pinned comment. Only when you feel led. Before we begin, I want to ask you to do one thing. Stay with this all the way to the end, because by the time we are done, you will understand exactly why 5 things you have been dismissing as ordinary are actually divine navigation signals. You will hear something buried in one of the oldest sacred stories that most people walk right past, something that completely reframes why the call on your life feels the way it does. And in the final moments, I am going to speak something over you that I believe will stay with you long after this ends. That belongs to you regardless of anything else. Stay for it. Now, let me begin where you actually are. Not where you want to be, not where you are headed, but where you have been, inside the ordinary weight of your weeks, in the quiet of a night where nothing dramatic happened but something beneath the surface kept shifting anyway, in the space between waking and being fully awake, where a thought was already waiting with no clean beginning or end, not a worry exactly, not a plan, something harder to name than either of those, a knowing that your life is supposed to look different from this, and you are not quite sure how to cross the distance between here and there. That is the territory I want to start in, because most messages skip over it. They move too quickly to the promise, to the breakthrough, to the declaration, and you are left sitting with that unnamed thing, nodding along, but quietly wondering if anyone actually knows the specific ground you have been walking. What you have been carrying is not purposeless restlessness. It is not spiritual confusion or the beginning of something going wrong. It is signal. It is the living frequency of a God who has not stopped transmitting just because the noise in your life got loud enough to drown it out. And there are signs that this signal has been reaching you, 5 of them. I want you to hear each one carefully because you may have been misreading them entirely. The first sign is the sleep that keeps breaking at the wrong hour. You wake and the room is dark, and nothing external pulled you from rest, but there is a weight present, a sense of something unresolved that circles without landing. This is not a sleep problem. This is a soul that has not yet been given language for what it already knows, moving through the night like someone turning on lights in a house they have never lived in before, looking for the room where everything finally makes sense. The second sign is that you no longer belong to the spaces that once held you comfortably. The conversations that used to pass time now pull something out of you rather than put something back. You leave gatherings more depleted than when you arrived, and you cannot find the right words to explain it to the people who notice. This is not antisocial. This is the natural movement of someone who has received an assignment elsewhere and is beginning to feel the direction of where they are actually supposed to be. The third sign is that the old ambitions have gone quiet. The goals that once drove you belong to a version of yourself that lived in a different chapter, and the new purpose has not yet fully shown its face. You are standing in a gap between what was and what is coming, and the gap looks like failure because nothing visible has replaced what left yet. This is not the loss of motivation. This is the clearing of old frequency to make room for the signal that is about to come through clearly. The fourth sign is that certain things keep finding you, a word that repeats itself across 3 separate conversations, a passage someone reads aloud, and something in you recognizes it before your mind catches up. Moments of timing that feel too precise to dismiss casually. This is not coincidence. This is navigation. This is the signal calibrating its approach, making certain the receiver is still in range. The fifth sign is that certain moments feel prearranged. A conversation that happened at the exact right time when no logical arrangement made it possible. A door that closed and looked like loss. And then, what walked through in its place was better. A meeting that had no business occurring but did, and something shifted in the room when it happened. This is not luck. This is your spirit, recognizing terrain that something in you already knew was coming. If you saw yourself in even one of those 5 things, I want you to type, "I hear it," in the comments right now. Those 3 words, just "I hear it," because naming the recognition is the first act of answering. Now, let me be clear about what those 5 signs actually are, because they are not the unique experience of unusually sensitive people. They are the unmistakable pattern of a frequency that is actively looking for a prepared receiver. And there is a word, buried in the original language of the sacred text, that explains precisely why. The word is kara. In most English translations it appears as called. God called Abraham, God called Moses, the Lord called Samuel by name. And most people read that word and think, a general invitation, something extended broadly. But kara does not simply mean to reach out. The Hebrew carries far more weight than that. Kara means to call, yes, but also to proclaim, to name, to summon specifically, by identity and assignment. In the Hebrew understanding, when God calls a person, he is not making an offer open to anyone who is interested. He is speaking an identity into existence. He is saying, this specific one, by name, for this specific purpose. Consider the difference between someone saying, you might want to consider this, and someone reading your name aloud in a room of authority, saying, you have been designated. The first is a suggestion you can set aside. The second is a commissioning that does not dissolve because you are not ready for it. When God calls you, he is doing the second. The restlessness you have been carrying, the signs you have been noticing, the frequency threading through your ordinary days without a name, those are not symptoms of something going wrong. They are evidence that a commissioning has been in progress. And commissionings do not cancel themselves when they go unanswered. They wait, they continue transmitting, and they do narrow as the seasons move. But this is only the first layer. What I want to show you next goes considerably deeper. It is going to explain not just that the call is real, but why you have been struggling to hear it clearly, why the signal has felt like static, and what happened to the most powerful prophet of his generation when he arrived at exactly that same place. There is a moment in the story of Elijah that most people move through too quickly because it feels like a detour from the main event. He had just done what no ordinary man does. He had stood before an entire nation, called fire down from heaven, and won by every visible measure. And then, within a single chapter of the same text, he was sitting under a tree in the desert, asking to die. One chapter. From fire from heaven to the floor of the wilderness. This is not a contradiction. This is what happens when someone has been operating at the absolute edge of their capacity for so long that when the intensity finally pauses, there is nothing left to hold them upright. He had given everything, and what remained was not peace or satisfaction. It was an empty man in the heat telling God he was done. And here is the part that changes everything. God did not appear with a correction. God did not send a reminder of the victories Elijah had just been part of. God sent an angel, and the angel did not come with a lesson. The angel brought bread, set a hand on his shoulder, and said simply, "Get up and eat. The journey ahead is too great for you, but you are not alone in it." What had felt like God going silent was actually God coming close. Elijah rose, and he walked 40 days to a mountain called Horeb, which is the same mountain where Moses first encountered the voice of God in a burning bush. He walked to the place where sacred appointments had always begun. And when he arrived, he did not stand at the summit. He went into a cave, and in that cave, the voice came, not in accusation, not in correction, in a question. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" God already knew. He asked because Elijah needed to hear himself answer. Because naming where we are is always the beginning of being able to move from there. Then something happened that I want you to receive very slowly, because it speaks directly into the silence many of you have been calling abandonment. There was a wind, a great wind, powerful enough to split mountains and shatter rock. And the voice of God was not in the wind. There was an earthquake. The ground itself shifted. And the voice of God was not in the earthquake. There was a fire. And the voice of God was not in the fire. After every overwhelming and dramatic thing had passed, what arrived was something the English translations call a still small voice. But the original Hebrew is far more precise than that phrase allows. The phrase is kol damama, daka. Kol means voice or sound. Damama means silence. Not simply the absence of noise, but the presence of something that requires noise to completely stop before it can be perceived at all. And daka means thin, fine. The absolute thinnest thread of sound that still qualifies as sound. Not a whisper, something thinner than a whisper. The frequency that passes through every dramatic layer and arrives, exact and delicate, only at the receiver that has learned to go completely still. This is how God spoke to Elijah. Not in the earthquake, not in the fire, in the frequency that only reaches the prepared receiver. And I want to ask you something about your own life. What if the seasons you named silence were actually that? What if what you called God's absence was actually God moving to the channel that requires everything else to go quiet first? What if he stepped back from the earthquake and the fire, not because he had nothing left to say, but because he was shifting to the voice that can only be heard at a depth of stillness most of us have never been trained to reach? What felt like spiritual drought was actually the clearing of channels carrying the wrong signal. What felt like abandonment was actually the preparation of a receiver for a frequency it was not yet calibrated to hold. What felt like 40 days of nothing was actually the walk toward the mountain where the appointment had always been waiting. What felt like hiding in a cave was actually arriving at the only place where the voice of God becomes unmistakable. If something in those words just shifted something in you, gently press the like button before we continue. Not for this channel. So that this reaches someone else tonight who is in their own version of that cave, wondering why the God who once felt so clear has gone so quiet. And I hear the Father saying to you right now, the same thing he said to Elijah in that hidden place. I did not leave you here. I brought you here. What you thought was the end of the call was actually me stepping closer, moving from the frequency of the earthquake to the frequency that was always meant for you. Now, before I take you into what comes next, I want to be transparent with you about something. Everything in this message is freely given. But what we have been talking about, the signal, the receiver, the static that accumulates over years between the frequency God designed and your capacity to detect it. This is not only a spiritual reality, It is also a neurological one, and there is something that addresses it directly, at the level of the brain itself, that I am going to share in full in a later part of this message. It is called the Genius Song. I will explain exactly what it is, how it works, and why it connects to everything we have been covering when we get there. But I name it now, because if something in your spirit has already confirmed that this is what you have been looking for, the link is in the description below and in the pinned comment. You do not need to act on that right now. Stay with me, because what I am about to show you next is the part this entire message has been building toward, and you will not want to have missed it. Now, I want to tell you something that almost nobody teaches when they talk about divine calling, something most of us were never given language for. And it begins with a story about a man named Jonah. You may know the broad outline. Jonah received a call, a direct, unmistakable assignment to go to a city called Nineveh. And Jonah, rather than going, boarded a ship, heading in the opposite direction. The text says he fled from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa. He went down into the ship. He went down into the lowest part of the ship and fell asleep. Every single movement in that passage is downward, because that is exactly what it feels like to run from a calling you know is real. Not freedom, descent. The storm, the water, the creature that swallowed him whole, those are the consequence of a specific direction. But the consequence is not what I want you to focus on today. What I want you to see is 4 words in the 3rd chapter of Jonah that most people move through in about 2 seconds and miss entirely. The word of the Lord came to Jonah a 2nd time. 2nd, not 3rd, not 10th, after years of patient waiting while Jonah got comfortable wherever he had landed. 2nd, the call returned once, and this time the text does not record Jonah negotiating or hesitating. He arose and went. Here is what I need you to understand about those 4 words. The 2nd call carried the same message, the same assignment, the same city. Nothing about the calling had changed. What had changed was the window. The season of the 1st call, its ease and openness and accessibility, that was gone. Jonah had used that. What remained was the same door, but narrower, and Jonah walked through it, and Nineveh was saved. But the story also carries, in the way sacred text always does when you read slowly, a clear implication. The 2nd time was the last time. Now let me tell you what this means for how divine seasons actually work. There are moments in a person's life when what God is asking for requires almost nothing from them in terms of effort, because the alignment has already been set, the preparation has already been completed, and the doors are being held open by something they had no hand in arranging. These are what the ancient Hebrew writers called kairos moments, appointed time, time that is qualitatively different from the ordinary calendar. In an appointed season, 3 things happen. The obstacles that have been blocking the path step to the side on their own. The connections you could not manufacture, no matter how hard you worked, begin arriving without your effort. And the internal resistance that has kept you in the same place for so long begins losing its grip. Not all at once, but enough that movement becomes possible in a way it was not before. That is the feeling of a divine season from the inside. But appointed seasons are not permanent. Nineveh needed Jonah at a specific point in history, not any point. The window was real, and the window moved. Now, before I show you exactly who you are inside this moment, because I am going to show you that, and before I take you into the part of this message that I believe you have been moving toward your entire life, I need you to hold something. There is one more thing I have not yet told you, one more layer beneath everything we have already covered. And it is the piece that ties together the signal and the receiver and the season and everything Elijah heard in that cave. Stay with me through what comes next, because it is the reason this message exists and the reason you are still here. And before we go into the final movement of this message, I want you to know that what I am going to speak over your life near the end of this, and we are almost there, I believe it is the reason you were led here today. Stay until that moment. Now, let me tell you who you are. There is a moment in the story of Moses that I want to use as a single point of entry, because it contains something that changes everything about how we understand the gap between who we think we are and who we were actually made to be. Moses had been a shepherd for 40 years, 40 years of ordinary work in ordinary land, by every visible measure, the least consequential figure imaginable. And then a bush caught fire and did not burn. And when Moses turned aside to look, the voice came, and the commissioning began. And Moses had every reasonable objection. I am not eloquent. I am slow with words. I am the wrong person for this. And God's answer did not address Moses's resume. God said, I will be with your mouth. Hear what that means. The call did not come to Moses because Moses had already developed the tools the call required. The call came because Moses was the designated one, and what the designated one lacks, the one who designated them provides. Now let me tell you who you are in that. You carry a voice. Not just a way of speaking, but a way of naming things that others can only feel but cannot put into words. There are moments when you say something and the room gets quieter, not because you are the loudest voice there, but because you have said the thing that needed saying in the way that needed to be said. This is not personality, this is assignment. You are a voice for the spaces that have not yet heard clearly, and God does not send voices into those spaces that are not first tuned to the frequency He is transmitting. You carry a way of seeing, the patterns that reveal themselves to you before they become obvious to everyone else, the sense of what is approaching that arrives before the evidence does, the perception of the space between things, the unspoken dynamics, the things that are true but have not yet been named. This is not overthinking. This is the accurate perception of a seer. And seers are not people who happen to be intuitive. They are people who have been specifically designated to see on behalf of others who cannot yet. And you hold ground. You have been in battles that were designed to remove you. Every season that came for you and failed. Every attempt to reduce you to something less than what you were built to be. Every moment where the most reasonable choice would have been to stop, and you did not stop. That is not stubbornness. That is the nature of someone who was placed in the battle specifically because they would not be moved by it. Now I want to speak directly into the most common question in the mind of a chosen one who has been carrying a call they have not yet fully answered. The question sounds like this. Am I really the one? Do I actually qualify? What if I answer, and I am wrong about what I heard? That question is not weakness, it is wisdom. Only someone who genuinely understands what they would be stepping into would stop to ask if they are worthy of it. The ones who never ask are the ones who never truly understood the weight of what was being offered. But here is what is also true, and I want you to receive this without moving past it. God does not call people who are certain of themselves. He calls people who are certain of Him. Moses' entire story is God commissioning someone who kept saying, I am not enough. And God kept saying, I know. Come anyway. I will be with you. So let me tell you what you are allowed. You are allowed to answer before you feel completely ready. You are allowed to step into what you were made for without having every word prepared in advance. You are allowed to stop waiting for the version of you that has no more doubt before you begin moving. You are allowed to carry the weight of the calling and the uncertainty at the same time, because that is exactly what Moses did and what Elijah did and what Jonah finally did on the second call. And you are allowed, right now, in this moment, to say yes to the call that has been finding you through every season and every silence and every question you brought to God without an answer coming back in the form you expected. I want to give you something before we continue. You do not need to move from where you are. Just settle where you are sitting or lying, and let this happen inside you rather than around you. Picture the frequency, not as a sound exactly, but as the presence of something that has been transmitting for a very long time, threading through your earliest memories, through the moments you felt most like yourself. through the seasons where something ancient in you recognized terrain that it had been prepared for. It has been there the entire time, running beneath every layer of noise and delay and doubt. Now, in this moment, just let yourself receive it, not analyze it, not earn it, not argue with it. Just let the signal that has been transmitting for your entire life arrive at the receiver that was built before your first breath to receive it. That is the call. And you just heard it. A few months ago, the story of someone reached me that I have been sitting with. He had felt a calling for 7 years. The clarity was never the problem. He knew what he was supposed to do. The readiness was the problem. He kept waiting for the season where the fear would be entirely gone, where every circumstance would line up perfectly, where the confirmation would come in a form he could not argue with. And then one ordinary day, without dramatic event, without any external signal that this was the right moment, he made one small act of obedience in the direction of what he had been carrying. Just one. A single step. Not the whole journey. One step. In the 30 days that followed, without him forcing any outcome, without him manufacturing anything, what he had been trying to produce for 7 years began arriving on its own. The connections, the provision, the open doors, not because he finally became the fully prepared version of himself, because he finally began moving in the direction the frequency had been pointing. He told me afterward that the thing that changed was not the circumstance, it was the tuning. He said, I stopped trying to feel ready and started trying to stay aligned. And once I was aligned, everything the call had been carrying came through. And I hear the Father declaring over you right now, hear me. You are my voice in the spaces that have not yet heard me clearly. You are my seer in a generation that has gone partially blind. You are my warrior in a battle that was designed for someone who was prepared exactly the way you have been prepared. I called you by name. I called you one last time because this is not a preparation season anymore. This is a sent season. The line does not go silent because God has nothing left to say. The line goes silent when the receiver is no longer tuned to the frequency, but you have been tuning it through every wilderness, through every cave where you sat while the earthquake and the fire passed, through every moment you chose to stay when leaving was easier. The receiver has been getting clearer, and the call is at its sharpest right now, in this season, at this frequency. Let me pause here for a moment before we continue. You have been with this for a while now, and I want to make sure that what you carry out of this message is not just an emotion that fades by tomorrow morning. I want you to have something specific and solid. Here is what is actually true, based on everything we have covered together. God's call is not a general spiritual sentiment applied broadly to anyone who happens to need encouragement. In the Hebrew, to be called by God is to be named by God, commissioned by God, spoken into a specific assignment by a specific voice that does not take back what it has declared. The 5 signs you recognized earlier are not random. They are the pattern of a frequency looking for the receiver it was always directed toward. The reason the signal felt muffled was not because God turned away. It was because modern life generates a kind of interference that accumulates over years, and what we mistake for divine silence is actually the static of a system that was never designed to quiet itself so you could hear what matters most. Elijah at Horeb, Jonah in the sea, Moses at the burning bush. These are not ancient history with no connection to your Monday morning. They are the documented pattern of how divine seasons find people who are not standing in the obvious place, not wearing the obvious credentials, not arriving from the obvious direction. You are the one who stayed through the wind and the earthquake and the fire. You are the one who is now standing in the thin stillness where the Kol Damama Daka can finally reach without obstruction. You have already done the most important part. You remained a receiver. Now let me tell you about something that addresses the remaining static at the level where it actually lives. Research teams at Harvard, Princeton, and MIT, among several other leading neuroscience institutions, have documented something that connects directly to everything we have been discussing. Over decades of controlled study, they documented the existence of a specific brainwave frequency called gamma, and they mapped what it does. When gamma frequency is active in the brain, perception sharpens, intuition accelerates, the capacity to recognize patterns that others miss, to receive information that cannot be explained through ordinary channels, increases measurably, not metaphorically, on instruments that record the electrical activity of the brain in real time. They also documented what happens to that frequency over time. Beginning around age 7, as the structure of formal education and the pace of modern life take hold, gamma activity in the brain measurably decreases. Not because the brain was damaged, because the environment systematically suppresses the receptive, open states that gamma requires to stay active. The focused, productive, achievement-oriented framework that shapes most of our lives from childhood onward is precisely the kind of framework that crowds out the frequency the chosen one was designed to operate from. They called it the decline effect. The clarity you remember from childhood, the way everything once felt more vivid and connected and accessible, that was not imagination. That was gamma. And the accumulation of years of ordinary adult life has been dimming it in a way that no amount of willpower, no amount of spiritual practice alone fully reverses. A neuroscientist named Dr. Robert Lake spent 34 years studying this problem specifically, whether the decline effect could be reversed. What he discovered, after decades of research, drawing on findings across multiple institutions, is that specific patterns of sound, precisely calibrated to the brain's own electrical architecture, can produce a state called brain entrainment, in which the brain synchronizes its own frequency to the frequency of what it is receiving. The receiver, in other words, can be retuned. And here is what that means for you. The sensitivity that makes you a chosen one, the perception, the intuition, the capacity to receive signal that others cannot detect, those are not only spiritual gifts. They are neurological realities built into the architecture of your brain. And they have been suppressed by the same interference that suppresses every receiver exposed to modern life long enough, not permanently, but significantly. Dr. Lake compressed 34 years of research into a 7-minute audio track. You listen through headphones. You do not need meditation practice. You do not need to restructure your mornings. You listen for 7 minutes, and the sound does what it was designed to do. The brain begins to synchronize. The gamma frequency begins to reactivate. And the static that has been sitting between you and the clearest version of your perception begins to clear. Think about what you spend money on trying to address this. Meditation apps running $15 a month that were not designed with gamma in mind. Online courses at $150 that teach technique but do not reach the neurological root. Therapy sessions at similar cost that address what sits above the frequency rather than the frequency itself. Weekend retreats at $500 or more. All of those things have value. None of them were built to do what this does. Dr. Lake called it the genius song. Let me tell you who has used it. More than 18,000 people. And of those 18,000, fewer than 4 out of every 100 have ever asked for a refund. 4 out of 100. In an industry where most products of this kind see refund rates 3 to 5 times higher, that number tells you more than a testimonial page could. Let me also tell you a brief story. A woman in her early 50s, a teacher by profession, had spent years feeling like the spiritual clarity she once possessed had become something she was reaching for rather than living from. She described it exactly as we described it earlier in this message. The signal was there. She could feel the transmission, but the reception was inconsistent. She used the genius song for 11 days before she said anything to anyone. And what she described was not a dramatic experience. It was a quieting of the interference, a return to a frequency of perception she had not accessed consistently since her early 20s. She said it felt less like learning something new and more like remembering something that had always been true. The Genius Song is available at a standard price of $49, but because Dr. Lake's mission has always been to place this specifically in the hands of the people who most need it, those who arrive through this message can receive it for $39. That price does not exist anywhere else, not through any other channel. It is not on Amazon. It is not through any third-party retailer. It is exclusively available at the link in the description and in the pinned comment. And at $39, you receive more than the track itself. You receive a second audio track, calibrated specifically for children, designed to give young ones access to the gamma frequency before the decline effect takes hold, and that track carries a standalone value of $19. You receive the original text that inspired what later became known as The Secret, focused not on vague positivity, but on the practical architecture of how provision and purpose actually organize themselves, valued at $20. You receive a 22-minute guided visualization session that walks through 4 domains of life: financial, relational, physical, and purpose, so that the clarity the frequency opens becomes anchored in something specific you can return to, valued at $29. And you receive a concise daily reference with 5 habits that the most consistent users of the Genius Song have reported as the practices that keep the reactivation sustained over time, valued at $12. That is, $80 in additional resources included at no extra cost, with a $39 investment. And the guarantee. I want to tell you this clearly because it removes the last remaining hesitation. If you use the Genius Song at any point in the next 90 days and decide it has not delivered what I have described, you contact Dr. Lake's team and you receive every dollar back. No conditions attached. No complicated process. Full refund. And here is the part that matters most to me personally about how this guarantee is structured. You keep all 4 bonus resources, all $80 of them, permanently, whether you stay or not. Dr. Lake designed it this way because he believes that even if the core track does not resonate with a specific person, the additional resources carry independent value, and he would rather you leave with something useful than leave with nothing at all, which means the actual question is quite simple. The worst possible outcome is that you invest $39, receive $80 in resources that remain yours regardless, and decide the central tool is not for you. That is the flaw of this. The flaw. Now here is why this moment is the right one. Not because of an artificial countdown, not because of pressure I want you to feel, but because of what we have been discussing for this entire message. The receiver is clearest in the moment the revelation is alive. The gap between understanding something and acting on that understanding is smallest when the signal is strongest. Every hour that passes after a moment of genuine clarity is an hour in which ordinary noise begins rebuilding the interference we have been naming all the way through this. The time to respond to a divine season is inside the season. Before you search for the Genius Song anywhere outside of this message, I want to protect you with one piece of information. There are unauthorized versions and third-party listings that carry that name, but are not the product Dr. Lake developed and tested. The only source I can verify is the link in the description below and in the pinned comment. That is the only channel where the guarantee, the bonuses, and the $39 price are active. Anywhere else you encounter it, the terms will be different, and I cannot stand behind what you receive. If your spirit is confirming that this is a next step, everything you need is in the description and in the pinned comment. The Genius Song, only when you feel led. Only if something in you has been recognizing itself in what we have been discussing. If that confirmation has come, let your like button be your agreement before we close. Let it reach someone tonight who is searching for exactly this. Now let us come to a close together. I want to take a breath here before anything else. Not to add another layer, just to acknowledge what it took to arrive at this moment. The seasons of sensing something without being able to name it. The cave seasons where everything went quiet and it felt like abandonment. The 40-day walks toward mountains that had not yet revealed themselves as sacred ground. Every single one of those seasons was the voice of God, preparing a receiver for a frequency it could not have carried before going through what it went through. I want to honor that before we close. And now I ask you to release something. Release the doubt that told you for years that you were not the right person for the call you were hearing, and that is no longer yours to carry. Release the delay, the seasons you cannot recover, the time you spent waiting to feel worthy enough to answer, and that is no longer yours to carry. Release the version of yourself that survived by making yourself smaller than the calling required, and that is no longer yours to carry. Release everything that has stood between you and the yes that has been waiting inside you since before you had the courage to give it, and that is no longer yours to carry. It is done, and I hear the Father declaring over you in this moment. You are my voice in the spaces where clarity has been absent too long. You are my seer in the generation that is learning to look again. You are my warrior in the battle that required someone who had been through the fire and come out knowing what fire cannot take. You are commissioned. You are equipped. You are sent. Amen. Know this before you leave. You are not alone in this. Right now, in this exact moment, chosen ones across this world are receiving this same call, in this same season. The awakening happening in you is happening in others. You are part of something larger than your individual answer. If someone came to mind while you were listening, someone who has been unusually quiet recently, someone carrying something they cannot explain to the people around them, someone who has been so close to stepping forward and keeps arriving at a reason to wait just a little longer, share this message with them. What you received here today might be the call that finds them. Type "I answered" in the comments right now. 2 words. I answered. Because you were here, you stayed, and that is already the beginning of everything. For those whose spirit was confirmed by what was shared about the tool for retuning the receiver, the link is in the description and in the pinned comment. Only if you feel led. Go. Not when the fear is gone. Now. The frequency is clear. The receiver is ready. The call has been given, and you have heard it. Go.